Okay, I'd like to call the meeting of the Committee of the Whole for July 8th to order. And it's not on the agenda, but by city ordinance, typically after one of the national holidays, we do the Pledge of Allegiance. So if we'd stand, we'll do the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. We only do that a few times a year by ordinance, but tonight is in one of the nights. Could we please have the clerk call our roll?
Ms. Ammons?
Present.
Mr. Brown?
Here.
Mr. Jacobson?
Here.
Mr. Madigan?
Here.
Ms. Marlin?
Here.
Mr. Roberts?
Here.
Mr. Smythe?
Yes, here.
Mayor Pressing?
All right. We move to the next item, which is, are there additions to the agenda? Okay. I see none.
Move approval of the agenda.
I think it's approved. I don't think we do
You
actually
don't
need.
move the agenda?
No, we don't.
Oh,
Thank you,
you
though.
should.
And next is staff report. Is there a staff report at this time? I see one. Yes. Community Development, Libby Tyler. Please share with us.
Okay, I wanted to pass around this example conference bulletin from the statewide preservation conference that was held just about 10 days ago. And if you look through the program, you'll see that our own Robert Myers was involved in the program, actually was the chair of this conference. Took place in Evanston. They had about 230 folks involved in historic preservation from Illinois attend, including 2 of our own commissioners. And they included a day-long training session for historic preservation. So I wanted to commend Robert for his efforts and just highlight, again, our activities in the area of historic preservation.
Thank you very much. And is there any other, Tom Craner, do you want to step forward and introduce something? Please let us know.
Sure. Well, everyone should have received electronically this month's Economic Development Report. Some exciting things happening in town, specifically downtown. The butcher, Josh Boyd, when last we introduced this project, I don't think he had signed a lease, but he does indeed have a lease at 119 West Main Street, which is the former Das Cafe space. Work continues on the Cake Design Development Project with CoLab and Cafeteria Company. Also, work is moving forward on A+ VIP Lounge at the former V Picasso space. Bouffant Salon at the Pines at Stone Creek Commons is now open. That's at the former Wines at the Pines space. Also, renovations are just about complete, and stocking is also just about complete on, for the new Rulers on Philo Road. I believe they have an opening scheduled for later this week, so that project is moving forward. Related to Market at the Square, we are moving forward with the Link Up grant, or Link Up Illinois grant, helping to double link transactions at the market. Also, Sprouts at the Market, moving forward with some exciting programming. And then a partnership on June 29th with the Eastern Illinois Food Bank with the Buy One, Donate One program. Also related to public arts, the 2013-14 Murals on Glass call for artists is now available. So folks that are interested in submitting artwork for our Murals on Glass program can do so. They can get information at urbanaillinois.us/muralsonglass, all one word. And also there have been a number of art at the market workshops and performances that have been pretty exciting. I would like to announce that our redevelopment specialist, Brandon Boys, and economic development specialist, Kate Ferrer, both took their exam, went through training, and are now accredited certified associates in project management through the Project Management Institute. So that is something valuable that they can help bring back to the city and lead us through some project management. And then finally, we brought to you a few months back a new incentive program called a business development program, where we encourage businesses to go through business counseling and training at either SBDC or SCORE, and then get some compensation from the city or some incentives from the city. Based on feedback from council, we've expanded the program. The program is now available along Cunningham Avenue, and the program is now also available to, or I should say the upgraded program is now available to what we call creative industries, and everyone should have a copy of this in their the economic development report. But basically what we do now is we allow the expanded program to businesses that qualify as cultural, historic, creative service, and creative new media businesses. So previously, they would have not qualified for the expanded program. So that's all I have, and I'd be happy to try to answer questions.
Other questions for Tom Carino? Yeah, Eric?
I just have a suggestion. I think that, the report is quite positive. That's good news. Is there a reason why, I mean, it's public document, you've described it in public, is there a reason not to post it?
We make it available to city council, so there's no legal reason not to post it. So we can certainly talk internally with the mayor and administration to see how to handle that.
Yeah, just, I mean, this is something that just occurred to me, so maybe I haven't thought of all the pluses and minuses, but on balance, it seems to me that it might be a plus.
Sure.
Okay, other questions concerning economic development? Okay, thank you very much, Tom. Is there anybody else from staff who has a report? The mayor.
We have the Consul General from China, who is based in Chicago, coming to visit Urbana next Tuesday at 4 o'clock. And we have a group, I see much of our people here, a delegation going to our sister city in China the next morning. And so we'll be giving a little tour, and I'm open to suggestions on what kinds of things you'd like to show him about Urbana. But he'll be here for about an hour. And his name is, he's Mr. Zhao, and he's the Consul General. And there are not that many cities in the United States that have Chinese consuls. So Chicago, we're very fortunate to have one. And that's where we got our visas. They were very helpful to us. So I invite you to come at 4 o'clock and meet him.
And will that be here in the
we'll
council
have
chamber?
it in the council chambers and then go from there.
Great, thank you.
Okay.
All right. Okay, any other staff report at this time? None, okay. Let's move to the approval of minutes of our previous meeting from June the 10th.
I move approval.
Okay, so I think Carol Amons and then Diane Marlin seconded. Any changes or corrections to that agenda? The minutes, I mean. Those in favor indicate by saying aye.
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 And opposed? Okay, we accept the minutes. All right, it's time for the public input. We have a couple of people who want to speak at the time of the item that as it comes up. We have a couple other people who wish to speak at this time, so we'll start with those. Carla Donaldson. Carlos. Sorry, I misread that. Please give us your name and let us know what.
Good evening. My name is Carlos Donaldson,
Here we go.
406 Brookins Drive, for the past 35 years plus. A resident of Urbana for 50 plus years. At the last city council, I was deeply hurt by the action of the mayor. This is something that I don't think has happened, to my knowledge, of my 50 plus years in Urbana, that this type of thing would happen to an employee of this city. it seems to me that there needs to be a system where we could have a recall for the mayor or anyone that is elected, especially the mayor. They have too much power and no one to control them. And I don't think this action would have been taken had it been prior to the election. If you had done what you did at the last meeting, I don't believe you would be sitting where you are now. I know I speak only for myself, but I do have a large following of people in this community that respect me for my continued support of this city and for my dedication to the city. I have been an elected official back in the 80s, and I just don't think that was proper. Even when the employee had worked for this city for over 20 years, the supervisor of this person had not given them any type of reprimand or problems with their work ethics or work duties. As I listened to the person, it seemed to me that they had done everything that they could do to support this city. I hope that you don't plan to rerun for election again. If you do, I'm going to do everything that I can to see that you are defeated. And I think that I have a pretty good following that would follow me in this matter. That was unacceptable. I think at the time that you did it, you even left the country 2 weeks late, to be gone 2 weeks. This is the first time that you have been addressed on this issue. I think that is wrong. I must commend Eric Jacobson, which I have known for a number of years to be a man of integrity. What he did, I think he should be commended for what he done, and I hope that the other members will follow him. Diane Marlin, she and I haven't had too much to say prior to last meeting because I didn't know that much of her, but after she did what she did at the last meeting, I think that that was one of the best things that could have happened to you, and you're in my corner now. If you run for mayor tomorrow, I'll support you. I think we need people like you to be leaders in this community rather than someone that would make a decision such as you made. The gentleman is not here, the comptroller. He should be commended also. I think he was this person's supervisor prior to her previous supervisor that retired. No one gave this person a bad note on her employment. I can't understand it. And for you to do what you did, it's just outrageous. I wish to thank you two, and I hope the rest of the council will follow in the steps of Eric Jacobson and Diane Marlin to see that something is done, that this does not happen to an employee of this community again, such as this. I did not allow a sign to go into my yard this year, and I have done for years, but if Liz Walden want to put a sign in my yard and pay for it, I will go with it 100%. I would even tell her what to put. Remember Liz Walden, June 2013. Don't vote for Laura Preston. Thank you.
And next we have Reverend Burks. Reverend Troy Burks, would you like to come forward?
I don't even know if I'm going to speak now. Reverend T.A. Burks, 916 Fair Lawn. My comments are like-minded as Brother Donaldson's. I must prerequisite saying that I do not speak for the NAACP. I do not speak for the Ministerial Alliance. I do not speak for Champaign Community Coalition. I'm a member in all three organizations. I think all three organizations carries their own weight, and I only said that because as the thing you fill out says that I'm representing myself. It's appalling that Urbana has not, in this present day, taken time to make sure checks and balances are in place when it comes to appointments or reappointments. I believe it is not wise in any part of government for one person to have absolute power It doesn't even happen in our federal government. Our president has to have Congress pass something for it to even get to his desk. With that being said, Madam Mayor, I believe the community is disappointed. I believe that some sort of forthright knowledge of whatever transpired should be given to the public, and that when election time does come around, you have to remember that it is the people who put you in place and in the office, and you should always keep in mind that you always answer to the people. And with that being said, I thank you for your service. I'm not going to be as harsh as Brother Donaldson, but there's a lot of things this council needs to do in the very near future to make sure that this type of action does not happen again. It is not wise for Urbana, it's not wise for this council, and it's not wise for the people. So I would commend Brother Councilman Jacobson and Councilwoman Marlin for their initiative. I am in total support of whatever they come up with, because I don't believe any one person, no matter who it is, should have that much power. Thank you.
We have also two other individuals who do not wish to address the committee, but who have asked to have their position entered into the record. And so I'm going to read those. The first one is Bishop King James Underwood. And his comment is that he is still concerned about the sewer problem in the Dr. Ellis subdivision. And also another individual who would like to address the committee but has asked that they be, and their position does not wish to address the committee personally but wishes their position to be entered into the record, is Reverend Evelyn Underwood. And she comments that I do not believe that the Dr. Ellis subdivision sewer problem is resolved. So thank you very much. And those are the only people who have sent forth public input cards to be addressed before the item comes up. So we're going to go on. I guess would ask if there's any other public input from the City Council and Diane Marlin.
I just had one correction to the calendar that you all have on your desks, and there's a meeting missing, and that's going to occur next Tuesday at 4 o'clock in the council chambers, and it's the Market at the Square Advisory Board. So that would appear to conflict with the visit of the Chinese consulate. But anyway, that's Tuesday, July 16th, 4 o'clock, Market at the Square Advisory Board, and it will be televised.
Okay. Thank you very much. Other public comment from the staff or council? Okay. We're going to move on now to the events that are on the agenda. And the first one is ordinance number 2013-06-054, an ordinance designating a historic landmark at 1404 South Lincoln Avenue, the Zeta Tau Alpha Sorority House, historic preservation case number HP 2013-L-01. This has come from previous council discussion. Do we have a presenter? Yes, Robert Myers. And I would like to comment that I was in contact with Brianna Kraft, who was the nominee. She was willing to speak to the City Council via telecommunication by telephone, but we were not able to make the connection tonight. Unfortunately, some of the equipment has been under repair, and so we will not be able to talk to her at this time. But she was willing, and she was waiting to call in. Okay. Robert Myers.
This is to follow up in, excuse me, This is a follow-up from the City Council meeting where this was first considered. And at that meeting, the City Council asked for some guidance on whether waivers from certain provisions of the Historic Preservation Ordinance would be legal and would they be advisable. And so we've reviewed what you've asked us to take a look at, and the city attorney and I have spoken about this. I think you have a separate communication that, yes, in fact, you could pass an ordinance that would provide waivers or exceptions. It would be legal under Illinois law, if I'm understanding James Simons correctly. But I did want to offer some obvious drawbacks that city staff sees in this. And your memo covers this, but the first two I wanted to mention was that if there's some sort of an exemption or waiver that's provided as part of the ordinance, it can easily make other owners of landmark properties feel like they're being treated differently. In other words, we have one set of standards for all the landmark properties that we try to uphold. And if once you start saying that, well, this property has this standard and this property has a different standard, it makes property owners feel like they're being treated unequally. And then the second thing I wanted to mention was that you can very easily, if you pre-approve some sort of exemption, you can very easily lose control over the quality and the character of the work at a later point. In your memo, there's a couple of photographs that's included of a former sorority house in Urbana, where before and after photos with windows specifically. And it does really change the character very much when windows are changed. And I will admit that windows are sensitive in terms of, because it really can change the character dramatically just by changing out the windows. I'll give you an example. When someone's trying to disguise their identity, what do? They black out their eyes. You can take a photograph of their face and you can just black out their eyes and you can't tell who they are anymore. Their eyes are really a big part of our identity. And it's the same is true with windows. Windows on a historic building, it really is a large part of the identity. And so that's why the standards are very specific for window repairs and changes. It doesn't mean that they can't be replaced, but normally in order to avoid making drastic changes to the character of the building, the replacement windows would need to match very closely the character of what's being replaced. So city staff tried to think of creatively of ways to, can we provide exceptions or waivers and still do it without these drawbacks that we talked about? We didn't really come up with a very good path forward for doing that, providing waivers and exceptions up front. But what I can say is that the processes that we've adopted as part of the Historic Preservation Commission, there's plenty of opportunities for considerations, for economic impacts, for things like, hey, it's too costly. There's no way we can expense that. We can afford that. There's something called a certificate of economic hardship that the Historic Landmark Commission can consider. Let's say if an applicant finds that the what's approved or not approved is so expensive that it is burdensome for reuse of the property, for instance, they can apply for a certificate of economic hardship, and that can even be appealed, that decision, to this body. Very occasionally, an appeal will be heard by this body for certificate of economic hardship. I can say that since 2000, of all the certificates of appropriateness that the Historic Landmark Commission have reviewed for exterior changes, 96% have been approved.
I got a question on that point.
Yes.
How many of those are from owners of landmark buildings who wanted their property landmarked?
That wanted their property landmarked. I don't have
as opposed to people who opposed landmark and it was forced on them.
Right. I don't have a percentage. In the early years, most of the landmarks were actually submitted by the owners. And in the last few years,
So wouldn't it go to reason that owners of landmarked properties who wanted their property landmarked would come to you with things that would be likely approved?
Sometimes yes, sometimes no. Yeah. One of the things that we do is city staff works pretty closely with applicants before they apply to the commission. I think that's one of the reasons we have pretty good success rate is because we try to find accommodations up front to help people meet the standards. I think that's one of the best things that we can do. I do think that the interests of the owners and the interests of the city are aligned in that we both want to see the building reoccupied. None of us want to do anything that's going to prevent the building from being reoccupied. It's in the best long-term interest of everyone that happen. We also don't want to do anything, we don't want to impose standards that are going to be counterproductive. We don't want them to be overbearing. And even if the property owner feels like it is overbearing, there's a process to address that. So the recommendation of the city staff would be that one thing you could do is if you chose to, for instance, approve the ordinance, you could do so with passing a motion that provides a sense of the council in how you would like changes to be reviewed having to do with windows and the roofing materials. And you'd like reasonable accommodations to be considered and approved by the Historic Preservation Commission, for instance. I think in that way you could provide a sense of how you want this treated without undermining the integrity of the Historic Preservation Ordinance.
Okay, thank you. Well, before we have a debate and we have questions and answers for the council itself, we're going to allow the public input to occur, and then we'll come back and discuss in council the merit of this ordinance. First, we have who wishes to speak at this time on this issue is Brian Adams. If you'd come forward. Oh, you know what? I didn't see that, Brian. All right, so thank you. All right, Brian Adams just indicates that he would be in support of the nomination, but he doesn't want to actually come forward to speak. The other person is Colleen Rames. I didn't pronounce your name right. Rame. Okay, please come forward. You have 5 minutes, or however long a discussion will take.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Colleen Rame, and I'm an attorney with Meyer Capel Law Firm in Champaign, and I am here on behalf of the owners of the property who object to this designation. We are here primarily to answer any questions that may arise, but we also wanted to address a few things in the packet for this evening. One thing that I did want to make clear that while the potential economic hardship is a concern for the property owners, potentially a primary concern above and beyond that is just the process that was followed in this case. We mentioned, the city staff mentioned that there are various processes that can be followed in once the property is designated a landmark, and that it requires certain appeals to various stages of review depending on the size of the project, and that in and of itself is a burden on a property owner. And in this case, this burden would, if this resolution is approved, this burden would be imposed on the property owner without the procedures that are listed are set out in the ordinance being followed. As we've noted before, Ms. Kraft was not here, nor did she send a representative to answer questions at the public hearing before the commission, which was designated to be the evidentiary forum and where all evidence was supposed to be presented. And the consequence of that was that the city staff, via its memos and and other input from other sources subsequent to that time, has introduced further evidence, and the city staff effectively became the advocate for this position as opposed to simply summarizing each position. This has put the property owner in the position of having basically to defend a moving target. Again, today, the packet tonight serves as an example of this, where there is, again, even more information about windows and how repairs might be done, and included is an email from Christopher Enck, who makes several allegations that are ultimately unsupported. He alleges that these two properties are very similar, whereas, in size and in scope, the ZTA house is significantly larger than the house referenced by Mr. Enck. Also, of note, he mentions that there is that they've been able to make substantial repairs on a very tight budget, and no real information is given for us to be able to compare their budget to ours, or but we did notice on their website that this organization that Mr. Enck is a part of serves as their own architect and contractor, which presumably significantly reduces the cost. As a property owner, we don't have the kind of resources that internally that the architecture fraternity would have. Another just point that we wanted to bring up was that in investigating all of the options in terms of the repairs that we can do, the property owner has said, they're happy to contact people in the community whenever they've needed to work on the roof, for example.
You have 1 minute remaining. You have 1 minute remaining.
Okay, thank you. They have noticed, they've really tried to reach out to people who could effectively work on this type of older property, and they're happy to have the resources, but they're concerned about the additional back and forth. The processes that the city staff mentioned would add weeks, if not months, to determining whether or not they can accomplish a specific project, and the way that the organization works in terms of preparing a budget, it's significantly difficult for them to figure out what kind of budget they can allot to various projects. So again, I just wanted to highlight the process.
Diane Marlin.
I move to give Ms. Ramey as much time as she needs to
And I would
finish her
second that
presentation.
Okay, is that the will of council? All right. Go ahead.
Thanks. I don't want to be here all night, obviously. I just want to highlight the issues here of, here we had an application that was not supported by evidence at the hearing, and then the city staff effectively became the prosecutor, not the prosecutor, but the promoter of this application. And at the various subsequent steps along the way at the last council meeting, and then again tonight, there has been additional evidentiary material that's been introduced that the owner has to try to play catch up on and try to rebut at each turn. I wanted to just make it clear that we're here to answer any questions or concerns that you may have, and if I don't have the answer tonight, we'll be able to get that straight from the owners and follow up with you guys. So I'd welcome any questions that you may have at this time.
Okay. So are there questions for this discussion? Yes.
Does your client intend at all to alter the outside of the property in any significant way?
Right now, there are no immediate plans to alter. There are maintenance plans that they'd like to accomplish, but...
And what would those be?
they need to do some repainting and some repairs to the roof. So I think that they would have to determine what kinds of repairs they could do.
Would the repairs to the roof be of the same materials?
They have tried to source those materials in the past. I know in a prior project, a prior patching job, I think they were able to find a very limited a quantity of that material, and they were able to use it then, but they haven't been able to find the same materials this time.
Are there any, have there been any efforts to determine if it's economically feasible to upgrade the windows and retain their appearance, their exterior appearance?
I don't know what specific efforts have been made. I know that some of the suggestions have been considered and rejected for various reasons. One of them was the storm windows on the interior, which has actually already been attempted in this house and has not succeeded, given the width of the sills and the type of securing mechanisms that they would have to have. They've been installed and not been effective. And then the other suggestion that they noted was a sealing, like a treatment to help the seal, to add a strip to weatherproof it. And right now, the windows as they are now are tight to begin with, so there wouldn't be any room for an additional strip, a weather strip. And right now, they're popping open because they are so tight, so they're having issues with that. I don't know. I could find out if there have been other
And they're single pane windows,
specific-
right?
Right.
So they're
Mhm.
grossly inefficient.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Other questions?
Yeah,
And there's also the safety concern that we've raised before.
Yeah,
People
because
have fallen
they're-
out of these windows.
Right. They can be opened outwardly.
Yeah, that's the only way they do open at the moment.
Okay. Thank you.
Carol Amons.
I just had one question. Prior to the hearing of the Historic Preservation Commission, was your client notified of this? Were they contacted when this when it first became a project of the student? Were they contacted about this?
Not that I'm aware of. I believe that their first notification of it was after the application was already submitted.
Okay. Thank you.
I think so.
All right, other questions? Eric Jacobson.
So you noted the communication from Mr. Ank. Now, were the particular window treatments that he talked about, were those among the options that had been considered?
Yes, let me pull up that email. Let me see. So Mr. Enck noted that interior storm windows can be installed for the same money or less than replacing the windows, and that's what has already been tried. The interior storm windows have been installed. And then, he mentioned the compromise would be to keep the original windows on the primary facades but replace the windows on the rear of the house, or possibly in the later addition, which I think there are several problems with that. One is that then you're only getting half of your windows are effective, and then the other issue is that one of the things that has been brought up consistently in favor of this designation is the assertion that the later additions match so well to the original house that they should be considered, that this should be considered a very an integral, a building of high integrity. And if we were to, I would imagine that replacing the windows on the additions solely would meet the same sort of concern.
Do you have any insights into why the interior storm windows apparently succeeded in Mr. Enk's building but didn't succeed in this building?
You know, I don't really know very much about Mr. Enk's building, but I think that the reason that they didn't succeed in this building, and I'm not sure how this compares with Mr. Enk's building, but first of all, there's not much room between the pane window and the window frame to install the windows, so they're hard to install in a manner where they're very secure. And then the other issue is the use of this building is by undergraduates, and they're especially having the fraternity as tenants. The undergraduates liked to just pop the storm windows out, and therefore they weren't even remained installed.
Go ahead, continue.
So, Mr. Meyer, did you actually do any looking at the comparability of the two properties, Mr. Enk's property and this property?
I drove by that property in Champaign, I think it's on First Street the other night. Just took a quick look and just visually, not even leaving the vehicle, but there is a distinct similarity in terms of the architecture, and but it's true that this building has a large addition later that changes the size of the building.
All right, and so if we have no other questions at this time, thank you very much for your input.
Thank you.
All right, so I think it'd probably be useful then to have a discussion in council, in the committee, as far as, and we can maybe perhaps have a conversation with Robert Myers. Maybe you want to stay there and. Yes, Eric?
Well,
Yeah.
Carol hasn't said anything yet.
Then Carol.
I'll just start. I've read all of these requests. I'm really concerned about the process of this process. I was concerned about the last one, and I could see as I went through the neighborhood a little differently than this business front street on Lincoln, and it really drew me more of a concern because it was it's a much bigger problem than the previous one. In hindsight, I wish I had done something differently on the first one, but I think I will do something differently on this one. I really can't support the designation at this point until a few other questions that I think needs to be addressed by the Historic Preservation Society Commission is done before we force designations on people. That's the concern I have with that, and so that's the position I'll take today.
Other comments or dialogue? Okay, Eric Jacobson.
So maybe I'm alone on this, certainly alone among the people who've spoken so far. I'm not too concerned about the process. I think the origination of the proposal was certainly legitimate. I think that the fact that the nominator was not able to see the project through, I think that's unfortunate, but I don't think that substantively changed the outcome. And I think we always have in all of our reports that come to us that, where commissions consider things or that come to us from staff, the staff makes a recommendation. The staff makes a recommendation based on their specific area of expertise and their concern for the community. So the process, I'm not opposed to revisiting the process, but it doesn't bother me in this case. I think that, and I think that, yes, the members of the Historic Preservation Commission favor historic preservation as a general rule. Now, of course, you can kill a commission or a board by putting somebody on it who's actually opposed to the purpose of it. That's been known to happen in government, but that's not such a great thing, and that certainly wasn't done here, and I don't think it should be done. But but I am concerned about the details of this. I am concerned about, I mean, I think that the issue of the windows is an important issue. I live in a house that was built in 1905, and we have changed the windows. It's a big old house, and it would cost us a fortune to heat it, and we went for a long time without air conditioning, but in our 70s we actually kind of liked having heating and cooling. So you know, now our house isn't landmarked. I don't know if the changes we made to the windows would have violated landmark status, but they were important, you know, even just in terms of energy. So I hate for this process to drag on and on and on, but I would like to know, I'm comfortable with the process that was done, but I really would like to know more details about how feasible it is to make the windows functionally better and not change their appearance significantly. And I guess I would like to know whether there are material substitutions, for example, that could preserve the appearance of the roof. I'm not opposed to landmarking, and I'm not even opposed to landmarking buildings, even when the owner doesn't want to do that. Although I think that the case for the landmarking should be stronger in terms of the you know, the importance to the community in that case. But you know, we've got a big apartment complex in my ward that's called Landmark Manor, and the reason it's called Landmark Manor is because there was a house on their property that was raised to make this apartment complex that we knew very well Lincoln had stayed. So I wish that that had been preserved. I really, really do. So even if, you know, the owner of the property didn't want to, we've really missed something, you know, important in our history. So I'm not opposed in principle to landmarking in spite of the owner's wishes, but I really would like to know more about how much of a burden we're really putting on these owners to do what really should be done. The roof should be repaired. The windows should be made more efficient.
Thank you. Carol Emmons, did you want to speak?
I just wanted to redress for a second. Before I was on the council and as I was on the county board, but I was a resident of Urbana and watched a similar case where the owner wanted to expand a service to the community, just not far from here, and owned a property to do that. It was an older house. The neighborhood decided they wanted to keep the house and not allow the expansion. I believe that this process that I've watched over the last several years in some way pose an opportunity for there to be manipulation, selectivity, using this process. And so I watched it on the sidelines. I didn't get involved in that issue. As a community organizer, I let it be what it was going to be. But I'm concerned that the manipulation of the process, there's lots of room for that to take place. And I think that needs to be addressed so that it's very clear, very objective, and not subjective to the whims of someone who's trying to prevent something else. That's the problem that I have with the process. And the process is as important as the result. And if you don't look at the process, then you'll see this kind of selectivity taking place across the city that impacts one group as opposed to another. And that's my concern with this process.
Other comments? Okay. Maybe I could ask Carol to take over the chairmanship so I could make a comment? And if you would call on me.
I'll call on, no, I won't. I'm just, Dennis.
You have the power at the moment, but I might take that back. All right, thank you. Of course, I've expressed in the past my interest in the historic preservation of the city, and the buildings in the city, and my concern for honoring the architectural quality of the buildings that we have in our community. In my mind, the recent nomination, successful nomination of the Reed Sutton House showed that people in a community can care about their neighborhood and honor the historic qualities that they find or they believe are part of their neighborhood and the history of their community. This particular building is a block away from that successfully nominated structure. Some people feel that it doesn't matter that it's near or far. I think that some of the questions that came up originally seem to be less important right now. We had a long discussion about whether Mr. Joseph Royer himself had designed this building or was it merely his firm. I think we've pretty much agreed that it probably doesn't matter so much because the quality of the building speaks for itself. The determination by the Historic Preservation Commission is based entirely on the merit historically to be nominated and to be awarded as a landmark. It has to do, and they judge that by very specific characteristics, of which there's a list of like about seven or eight, and I'm not going to read them all, but the determination by the HPC is based entirely on the merit of the particular building. We have heard from our city council, our legal department, that it is not necessarily a concern during the time of nomination the effect that may or may not be true of financial hardship or to make a judgment of the effect of that choice to honor the historic quality of the building. The time to make a judgment of whether there is a hardship for the property owner comes after the nomination is successful and the landmark is a landmark, and at that time, the property owner has the right to file a certificate stating that there is financial hardship. So that separates that question from the determination whether the building itself is worthy to be considered a historical landmark in the city of Urbana. In reading the history of the ZTA, which is penned by the way, which was created by one of their more considered to be one of their more famous pledges, who was a journalist not only at the Daily Illini but was employed at the News Gazette for many years, who wrote the history of the chapter in Urbana, and which information I have passed to the members of the council in my recent memo to you all, should be considered in this designation, I think, fairly. That not only was the building design selected by the members of the chapter to be a certain style, but they even chose the appropriate plot or address on Vermont Street as to purchase the property because of its unique position in the center of Greek life at the university at that time. So it was a very purposeful choice to position the building there and to build it in a certain way. And I think that there are many reasons, and these are included in the history of the chapter itself, that argue that it is indeed landmark worthy. So what I'm wondering is, I see that the discussion about whether a certain type of window can be either moved or not moved, or is it more efficient to have a certain kind of screen on it or not, to be peripheral to the question that is in front of the council. The question in front of the council is whether this really is a value, can be valued as a historic landmark. And I think that just the style of the building, the fact that it was done by Royer and his firm, that it was specifically designed for the chapter, and was highly regarded as being the most important building to be constructed by the chapter, and that it's high profile in the history of the Greek membership at the University of Illinois at that time, qualify it. We can address the peripheral questions about materials, expenses, window style treatment down the line. And we can do that fairly, and we can do it with compassion to the results of the findings of the certificate of hardship, should it be filed. I agreed that the process itself could have been better, and we are learning. Yes, now, do you think, well, I guess it comes to my mind, whether the results of the student's application, as far as the quality and the history and the style of the building, could in any way be changed by her presence to talk about it. I think that those features are basically facts, and whether they might be discussed by the student or by maybe an appointed representative would not change the facts. Now, we might choose to say that somebody should have stepped in from the HPC to support the nomination, but the HPC has been asked not to step forward and to promote their own unanimous decision at the council, as if there was something wrong with that. Instead, I would imagine that the HPC should be in here at, to a person to support the nomination that they unanimously passed to us. But if they're not allowed to speak for their own nomination, somebody must come forward to speak. Very few people in this community have the ability or the time or the inclination to file a historic nomination. So I would support this nomination. I'm willing to consider adopting variances to the ordinance in the future, but I feel like it's a strong nomination, probably stronger than the one we previously passed, based on the merits of the case itself. And those are my comments. Thank you.
I'll turn the chair back over to Dennis.
Okay, thank you. Eric.
I have a horrible feeling that I may be a swing vote. And I'd like to, if possible, hear from everybody who I haven't heard from yet before, while I agonize about this.
I can't sit back. Diane Marlin.
We're in charge again.
Okay, I'd be happy to hear other comments from the council members.
This is a really, really difficult case, and I've been back and forth so many times on this, I feel like a ping pong ball. However, I think I've landed on the side of landmarking based on the criteria that were presented. However, as long as it comes attached to the advisory motion, which I would like to amend a tad to include the wording, and I'm not making a motion, I'm just giving you a heads up. I'd like to make the wording, should exterior elements such as windows and roof cladding. That would it broaden the flexibility of this advisory motion. And then I am really bothered by the process. So I guess I'm another variant of positions here. I'm okay with the landmarking, but I'm really not okay with the process. And I would like to, and when a process doesn't work, I think we have or if it doesn't work well or we're not happy with it, then I think we have a responsibility to improve it. And in this case, I think it needs to be, and I went back and read the historic preservation ordinance, and I think we need to strengthen the wording to basically require an applicant to be present at the public hearing at the Historic Preservation Commission, as well as at the meetings of the City Council when an application is considered. Either the applicant or a representative of the applicant. And the purpose of that would be to pull out city staff from having to act as the representative of the applicant, or they could theoretically be representing the property owner who opposes it if they can't be present. And I don't think we should put city staff in the position of representing either side in one of these cases. It's not appropriate, and it gives the appearance of the city taking sides here. So I have some wording to actually amend our, is it the zoning ordinance that concludes historic preservation? Okay, so I would offer that later when the time is appropriate as well. So that's where I am at this moment.
Thank you, Diane. Those are good words. Charlie Smythe.
Actually, Diane, I think it would be appropriate right now to send a request to staff to consider the changes to the ordinance so that they can be put on an agenda in the next 2-3 months.
Okay.
So if you make that motion, I will second it.
Okay. I move.
We don't yet.
Well, I would move that we direct staff to draft language that would specify that persons who submit an application to designate a local historic landmark must be present, or they must send a representative to be present at all public hearings and meetings of the Historic Preservation Commission and the Urbana City Council related to the case, and city staff may not represent applicants or property owners in the historic landmark application process before the Historic Preservation Commission or the Urbana City Council, so as to avoid the appearance of taking sides in the case.
Okay, I'd second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second by Charlie Smythe. Comments? Yes, Carol Ehrlemans.
I just wanted to add to that request that if a petitioner is not available, that petition dies for the lack of a petitioner, because we should not pick it up once a person is not there or no designee to represent that. City staff should not be representing that petitioner.
That's okay.
Okay, so that was a comment, and these are just recommendations. These are not. All right, I think we have Libby Tyler's going to make some input on this.
I think it's important to note at this point that amendments to the zoning ordinance need to follow their own process. They need to be notified. There needs to be a hearing at the Plan Commission. There needs to be input. There might be other language presented. So with your direction, we could start the process, but it is its own process, and what comes out will ultimately come to the City Council, and it might look a little different from when it started.
It usually does, but at least we're starting the process.
Yeah, it seems like we were able to strengthen the city ordinances by experience. Once again, we evolve.
Yeah, okay.
And I actually have another recommendation too, which I will forward to the community development about this ordinance. Charlie Smythe, do you want to say something?
No. I want to finish this piece of it, then we can get back to the other one.
Thank you, then.
I don't,
All right.
I don't know if Mike wanted to address it. Yeah, we just need to take a voice vote if we're done discussing this particular motion, and then move back to the main business.
All right. So we are finished with this recommendation? Okay, City Council is signaling and flagging us.
I believe there is right now a motion with a second on the floor regarding directives to staff.
Right.
So either you're going to vote on that or not.
That's what we're.
That's what we're considering voting on. Okay, all those in favor of those recommendations indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, we recommend staff consider recommendations. Caroline?
I'd like to actually officially move ordinance number 2013-06-054, an ordinance designating a historic landmark, 1404 South Lincoln Avenue, Zeta Tau Alpha Sorority House, historic preservation case, HP 2013-L-01. I so move.
Seconded then by somebody?
Second?
That would be to move to send it back to council.
Correct.
Okay.
Move to council
To
for
council.
approval. Yeah, okay.
Okay.
All right, so
Well,
Well, hang on.
did
We're
we
not
have,
done yet.
did that have a second?
Yes.
Okay, Eric? All right.
I seconded it, but I need to ask something about the content. This is to send it to council with a
It's
recommendation for
us to-
approval.
It's for us to take a vote on it right now, to go one way or the other to council, some kind of recommendation.
Aha, so, okay.
We need to vote on it here, and then.
Unrecommended.
Yeah.
well, I'd still like to comment. I haven't
Yeah,
had
we
a chance to comment
there's
yet.
been a
Okay.
chance.
All
We're
right.
not taking the vote yet.
Just want to make sure.
And while they're discussing, why don't you make your comments? Do you want to, or do you want to ask?
I'm not sure where we are right now.
All right. Okay, we're going to stop for a second and have a conference.
No, if I can, Mr. Dennis, we've been talking about an ordinance number without it being moved and seconded, so we can take a final action of some sort.
correct.
So you were just making the motion.
And so I'm
That's
trying to get
correct.
us
Very
to
good.
move this item, because we got 50 more on the
That's
agenda.
There you go.
That's fine. All right. So, did you want to make a comment? Or
Just a few comments.
go ahead.
I appreciate what everybody's saying here, but I think we really need to put this in the context of two things, process and ownership, all right? Process being, I agree with the comments about the people who are concerned about the process, but I really strongly disagree with people saying, oh, the process really seemed flawed this time, but we'll do better next time, but we're going to landmark this property owner's property. That is a big deal. These people commissioned this building, one owner, the entire time. I doubt that there's another landmark in town that has the same owner the entire time, from commissioning to now. Whether there is or not, I don't know. But I just really think it's important to remember these are the original owners of this property. They don't have any intent or incentive to significantly alter the property. Further, they should absolutely have been able to question the petitioner. That is a fundamental shortcoming of this petition. Fundamental. And it should have been stopped right there. And if the ordinance doesn't say that now, it should. And if it should, this petition should die right now. I mean, I don't know how you get around that. Thirdly, I find it interesting that a venerated architect in this community is being used to further this process. He may have influenced the building, but he did not sign the plans. He was not noted in the publications of the day, in the newspapers of the day, but we're trying to stretch this to, it was Royer influenced. It was his firm. I think that's a disservice to Royer. Anyone can copy an architect's work, whether it's in his firm or outside his firm. So we are maybe diminishing Royer's status by landmarking something that is not clearly a Royer. Fourthly, there was a significant addition to this building which is not in my, hey, I sell barbecue for a living, but I can look at that building and say, at that addition to that building and say, if it would have been landmark at the time and they'd have come to us and said, or they'd have come to the landmarking commission and said, what do you think about this addition? I think it would have been denied. It is not in keeping with the original architecture. It's kind of a cubic zirconia kind of to the diamond copy maybe, but it's kind of a big white elephant sitting off the side of this beautiful building. So I just think there are many, many reasons that we ought to give deference to the original owners of this property and allow them some time. I think their intent is genuine. I think it's very, very troublesome that we would admit in in this public forum, we have a flawed process, but it's okay this time, but we're going to fix it for the future ones.
Other comments? Charlie Smythe.
Well, I think that I'm not sure that the outcome would be any different, whether the original petitioner was in the crowd or. I'm not sure that the outcome would have been the same. Is it, hear me now, or yeah, I'm not hearing myself as well as I usually do. I'm not sure the outcome would have been any different, but and I think we do need to fix the process. But to me, we need to evaluate the building. We have a landmark case in front of us. It's come to us regardless by whatever process, flawed or not. And it strikes me that every one of these, when they've been contested, it's about the windows. Because you have windows that are not well designed at a time when energy was cheap, and so on. That always catches me. I always think we want to put efficient windows in there. I think it can be done. I don't think all the options have been explored, and so for me right now, my thinking is that the burden of landmarking is not all that onerous. That there's a good process to follow to determine whether certain things can be done. Things can be planned for. There are ways, and there are ways out of problems if it can't be done. I think HPC and staff have shown historically that they can work pretty quickly with the owners. And so I think that's the key part here. If we had an onerous process, a difficult process to get through, then I wouldn't support this. But I think we have a pretty good process in place, and staff are willing to work very hard to come up with solutions to this. For me, finding that energy efficiency in these windows, at the same time finding safety and comfort and so on, are pretty important. Likewise, I also support the advisory piece that goes with this. My original intent in sending it here was to sort of pre-plan and lay out by Historic Preservation Commission standards some advanced what are the what do you call the certificate the certificate of appropriateness. That was what I was after, was attaching advanced sort of certificates of appropriateness to the process. But based on what the staff is saying, that they can act quickly on these things, that we really don't need to do that in advance, that we should just follow the process. They can move quickly and get it done. So for now, I support sending this forward and will vote for it.
There's no further comments. We're just going to take the vote. Those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed?
I would move for a roll call vote on this, please.
I guess that's appropriate if we want to.
Okay.
All right, Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Ms. Ammons?
No.
Mr. Jacobson?
Yes.
Mr. Madigan?
No.
Ms. Marlin?
Yes.
Mr. Roberts?
Yes.
Mr. Smythe?
Okay, there is a majority, and so this would go forward to council. Thank you very much. Now we're going to move to the next step.
Oh, Dennis.
Oh, sorry. Yes, then all right. Yes, Diane Marlin.
I would move the advisory motion to read, should exterior elements such as windows and roof on the Zeta Tau Alpha House be determined to be so deteriorated they cannot be repaired and must be replaced, city staff and/or the Historic Preservation Commission shall work closely with the property owner to offer reasonable accommodations in reviewing and issuing certificates of appropriateness for the necessary repairs and replacements.
Is that seconded? Okay, Charlie Smythe seconds the motion.
Yeah.
Discussion?
Diane, I know it's sort of redundant, but could we add at the very end, just as quickly as possible?
Absolutely.
Okay. So friendly amended to add 4 more words.
Okay. All right, so the amended motion.
I'm sorry.
This would also go to council.
Okay, and discussion?
I'm
Carol
just trying to see where that is that she's reading
It's
on
on
this.
page 6. Of the memo.
It's in the memo from the,
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
at the end of the memo that we were provided.
Oh, okay, that's a question I have then. I have a question about this, Dennis.
Yes, go ahead, please.
So I guess this takes me back to the question about the process. Are we setting the precedence by making this statement on this application as opposed to another application that may have also experienced the same thing and needed this kind of consideration?
Good question. Robert?
Well, the intent here was to provide a sense of the council on what your opinion is. But I think what we were talking about before, in making an exemption or exception, you would actually be changing the outcome of a permit. You would be kind of dictating the outcome of a permit, which is a different thing. So I think the advisory motion helps provide some direction without necessarily dictating the outcome of a permit.
Okay, I'll just say that I think that this is, again, a on-the-fly, unfair process. Because we're making this just for this particular application and this particular designation. And I think that that's unfair in this process. So I won't support it.
Erica Jacobson.
I think every case is different. There's invidious discrimination, and then there's discrimination that makes sense because the grounds for it are appropriate. And I think in this particular case, that particularizing how we treat this particular property, it seems to me that it is appropriate.
Robert, does this, if this were passed, does it direct specific activity or action from for the possible petition of appropriateness? Is this a direct? Is this a direction?
Well,
or a suggestion?
I would say it's a suggestion that gives the sense of the council. That's my thinking. It doesn't dictate the outcomes, but it does provide some a basis for decision making as part of the points of decision that the Historic Preservation Commission takes into consideration.
And Diane Marlin, I would like to ask if let me see, if you felt that this was to answer specific concerns of the petitioner with the property owner, or is this something that is more of a universal concern? Is this? I guess I was wondering about that.
Well, I didn't write it.
Oh, okay. All right. All right.
I think
This came from staff
I think
itself.
it's obviously tailored for this particular case.
Oh, I don't know. Okay. All right. Well, the question is whether we should adopt the motion. Is there more comments? All right.
Diane, is this your intention to send this to council for approval? Or just, yeah.
Advisory motion, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
All right. So it's still tentative. All right. Those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
Aye.
Okay. Apparently, the majority sends it forward. All right. Thanks so much for that. All right. Let's go to the next item on the agenda, the Finance Department reorganization and ordinance. Who's going to present that?
I am.
Okay. Robert,
I'm filling in for Beth Beatty. She's out of town this week. This is a fairly self-explanatory budget amendment. It reflects that parking enforcement is now being overseen by the Finance Department as opposed to the Police Department. The amounts are basically the same except for supplies. It's being increased from $1,200 to $3,000. That's because parking enforcement officers are going to need new uniforms and jackets to reflect it. But they're not part of the police department. Their current uniforms and jackets reflect that. A little bit about the reorganization. Beth Beatty's now acting as parking enforcement supervisor along with her other duties. A key goal of this is to stop and reverse a long-term decline in parking ticket revenues. Those revenues were $440,000 in 08-09, and they declined to $350,000 last year. Beth says that there aren't going to be any ticket quotas for employees, but there's going to be increased awareness and accountability. Awareness, they're posting like monthly totals from a year ago, so people are aware of where they stand in relation to that. Parking enforcement employees are also being asked to write a daily recap, and also there's a time clock now being used. Plans are to hire 3 part-time parking enforcement officers as well as the 3 full-time officers by this fall. So that's about it.
Okay, is there any questions or comments? And, okay, yeah, Diane Marlin.
Will revenues cover the additional employees that are being hired?
Yeah, the budget isn't being changed, so that's reflected in there. 184,000 reflects the 3 part-time employees.
Eric Jacobson.
I guess that I still don't quite understand why this is a good idea, why it's better to have it in the finance department than in the police department. So maybe I'm dense and it's just going right by me, but can you try it again?
Well, I think they see it as a natural fit because they already do parking administration. They collect the fines. So this is just another aspect of it. And I think the feeling is police have a lot of important duties, significant duties, and maybe parking is not at the top of the list, whereas finance can devote them maybe a little more attention.
Carol Amons?
Is there a time frame on this complete shift? You mentioned that, I guess I'm trying to figure out, like, where are we in this process? It seems that it's already been shifted as of June 17th.
As of June 17th, yeah.
So this request is really not for us to approve the reorganization
No,
of
it's
the
just to
department,
inform you.
but to the money, to
Right.
move the money, basically.
I should add that the former parking enforcement supervisor, Monique James, is staying with the police department. So I think that probably helps pay for the extra part-time people. But Beth is assuming her duties.
But this is just a budget
It's a budget amendment, yeah.
That's all this is.
That's all this is.
Okay, other comments? Charlie Smythe.
I'm hoping that the uniforms can just be, patches can be changed as opposed to whole new uniforms. Have you thought about just changing the patches on the uniforms?
Well, we can talk about that
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah, I mean, that should be one way to consider how to save a little money here. Anyway, I'd remove to send to council recommendation for approval.
Okay. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
All right. Further conversation on this, or discussion? All right. Those in favor indicate by saying aye.
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 Opposed? All right, with that goes to council with recommendation of approval. We have now a presentation by the Sustainability Advisory Commission, and we have one person who's going to be speaking after we get the first, who wants to do some public input at this time. So if you would please present whatever you'd like to talk to us about. And please introduce yourselves.
Sure. More than 5 slides there.
Good evening. My name is Scott Tess. I'm the Environmental Sustainability Manager for the City of Urbana.
I'm Maria Ryan. I'm the chair of the City of Urbana Sustainability Advisory Commission.
We've got 2 different items to discuss with Committee of the Whole tonight. The first is in your packet. There's a draft sustainable water management plan and an associated resolution. to adopt that plan. This plan comes out of, I think it's about a 6-month process, guided by the Sustainability Advisory Commission, worked on by staff, and with public input. And so what I want to do is just give you the highlights of the plan, and I'd be happy to take any questions you may have after that. So the impetus for this plan is a couple factual statements here. Continued drawdown of our potable water supply, new risks to our potable water quality, impending state stormwater quality regulations, uncertainty created by climate change, and also the value of restored high-quality waterfronts, such as the Boneyard Creek project. The purpose of this document before you is first to review the current state of 5 different aspects of water management and then lay out goals to more sustainably manage these aspects. We've divided up this, all the different aspects of water management into these 5 categories: potable water supply and demand, potable water quality, surface water and stormwater quality, flood management, and recreational waters. The scope of this plan includes things like retrofits to city-owned facilities, regional collaboration, public policies, and public engagement. The time frame would start whenever City Council approves the plan and run through 2020. This is, I'm going to show just a few snapshots of the plan. This is the summary page near the beginning of the document. Quickly lists all the different activities that we intend to undertake through 2020. As I mentioned, there's a sort of a background review of the current status of water in the city, and so each section of each one of these 5 aspects gets a succinct review. This is an example of what one of the goal pages looks like. The aspect is listed at the top, the goal number, and then actions that would contribute to achieving that goal, and some bullet points for some refinements on how we might participate or undertake those actions. And then on the right-hand side, there is a listing of potential implementation partners. This format's probably familiar. It's exactly the same as the Climate Action Plan. This is an example of a facility goal. I'll just go through a couple different types of goals that are in this plan. So this is an example of a very specific retrofit that we think that we can do for city-owned facilities. So it's something we have direct control over and can make some real measurable gains. In all the retrofits that our facilities supervisor has worked with us in identifying equal, we think, 24% of current city usage that we can reduce. Pretty good number. This is an example of a promotional goal. So these are the type of things that we are undertaking quite often, doing public engagement, putting information on our website, brochures, media, communications to encourage certain kinds of practices by the public. This is an example of a policy goal. There's a couple of different policies listed in here that we want to take a look at and review and create some guidance for council for some action on. And then this is the implementation table at the end of the document. It's got the year on the left-hand side when we think that we should be able to complete each one of these items. The action requested by Committee of the Whole tonight, or for Committee of the Whole tonight, a couple different options: approve the Sustainable Water Management Plan as submitted, direct staff to make changes to the Sustainable Water Management Plan, or disapprove the Sustainable Water Management Plan. And I'm happy to take any comments or questions you may have.
Okay, so we have any questions for the presentation? Charlie Smythe.
I think the plan is very well written, and it moves very quickly, very specific. One of my pet ideas is not in there, so I'm going to throw it out and let you consider it. Mario probably knows what I'm going to say. The recharge of the aquifer. I think I scanned through trying to find something referring to that. There's nothing here. It could be as simple as putting some of our treated wastewater in the Sangamon instead of in the 2 places it goes currently. And because it's my understanding that the Sangamon actually recharges an aquifer, which in turn recharges the Mahomet.
We addressed that in the background
Oh.
section on page 8.
I missed it.
The reason we had looked at whether there was some activities we could practically speaking undertake in terms of aquifer recharge. And we determined we don't think that there are for a couple of reasons. One, it's believed with the current understanding of the aquifer. We know a lot about the aquifer, and there's a lot we don't know about the aquifer still. With what we know about it now, the Water Survey doesn't think that the city of Urbana practically sits over the top of the aquifer or over any recharge areas. So right there we would be talking about influencing something that's going on beyond our corporate borders. Not that that's impossible. Other problems with our current understanding of the aquifer is the complexity of the recharge. The actual places where the science thinks that there is recharge, not well known, not well tested. A lot of the water that comes into Champaign County in our area starts from out of state even and flows actually underground. So there's a question of where is the recharge actually happening, and if we don't even know that, how do we go about sort of recharging? And then one final comment in terms of just the question of volume with respect to the wastewater treatment effluent. The amount of volume they put out is a small fraction compared to just how much water falls on the ground naturally. So there's a question of volume there.
Yeah, no, like I said, I know it can't be done locally. It has to be shipped somewhere. And that's why I threw the Sangamon River in there. That's the only thing I understand is that there is a link via the Sangamon River for potential recharge. Something I hope that eventually gets figured out, because I think that's a needed component long term, and it's probably a regional thing. It's not a local thing. It's a regional thing.
Other questions? Mayor.
I'm very happy that you put in about assessing the effect of selling the wastewater. I want to ask a question. You made the statement that we don't have very much recharge within the city of Urbana, but we are drawing from the aquifer. So I think it's important to look at that whole thing. How would you be doing the assessment on the sanitary district proposal?
Actually, the Sustainability Advisory Commission has already started working on assessing and creating a memo for mayor and council to consider that. We've had the executive director of the sanitary district speak at the Sustainability Advisory Commission on that issue, and they're still considering that topic, and I think may vote on it in the next Sustainability Advisory Commission meeting. Do you want to speak to that?
Yes, we actually got pretty far along, but there was a lot of new data that was introduced when Rick Manor came to present to us, and so we wanted to have a little bit of time to kind of assess what we had drafted on the floor in the light of what he had presented to us before sending something along to council. But that should be, I would think, at our August meeting that we would be forwarding something.
And you're listening to some of the other people too? Because there was a lot of public discussion at the one meeting I went to at the sanitary district. So is he the only one that's been invited?
He's the only person that spoke on the topic at SAC. Myself and some members have attended the public meetings where there was public comment on it, and that's something we can certainly consider. Perhaps an advocate like Prairie Rivers can speak.
Yeah, I think you should really have a good listen to what they all have to say, because it's pretty controversial right now.
And I thought there had been some outreach to them at this point. Was that not?
Yeah, I've spoken with them in person on the phone about the issue.
Other questions or comments at this point? And then we have one person from the audience. All right, Eric.
Yeah, maybe I need some clarification on my understanding. So my understanding is that the aquifer is being drawn down under Champaign-Urbana, but are you saying that rain that falls on Champaign-Urbana and escapes our storm sewer system and percolates down into the ground, that doesn't go back to the aquifer?
So the city of Urbana doesn't really sit directly over the aquifer. Although we do, obviously, because we get our water from Illinois American, and their wells are drilled into the Muhammad Aquifer. That's where our water comes from. So recharge can happen anywhere, but in a lot of places it takes thousands of years to percolate through lots of less pervious soil layers. In other places, it percolates through sandy soils in 50 years. It's much faster. So when I'm using the term an area of recharge, I'm sort of excluding those places where it takes thousands of years and including those places where it's much faster.
Gee, I thought that you really had a concern for the future.
I plan far ahead, but not quite that far ahead.
Okay.
And we did have some folks from the water survey come and speak to us, and did explain that it's just the perviousness of the soil that the city is on is one of the big factors where there's really not much that we can do within the city limits that's going to percolate down into the aquifer in any. Yes.
And I'd like to ask a question too. Friends of mine have supported the idea of increasing the input into the wetlands at Weaver Park. That's not a direct, perhaps, recharging, but it would sustain a park that's in the city. Is that part of your conversation as well?
That's not something specifically that we've considered. Are you thinking putting effluent into that area? Is that
cleaned water, I guess, could be piped to recharge the wetlands feature of that park, which is not always sustained, and that's the comments that I've heard locally.
Okay, and that might fall into sort of a recreational waters category?
Yes. Mm-hmm. So if that hasn't been discussed, which I guess I'd be really surprised because the fellow who told me is a total advocate of this idea, so I'm sure he must have been included in some conversation. But I'd just like to add comment that that's a good thought. All right, so we got potentially, we have a person who'd like to speak at this time. So I'm going to call forth a member from the public. And that'll be Carol McCusick.
I'm still talking. Carol McCusick, 1907 North Cunningham, although really I'm not hearing everything. At the Sustainability Advisory Commission meetings, you really cannot hear the people. You can't hear the meeting a lot. But here, we're here. There's something on tonight's agenda which is a road reconstruction on Airport Road. And it says it's from Captiva to Somerset, and it's 0.7 tenths of a mile, but it doesn't explain anything about the reason for it. And when country roads get curbs, and why I'm talking close to the Sustainability Advisory partly is I'm wondering about what that means, because you have to use the street. Do you have to use street cleaners, and what does it mean for the stormwater? I mean, and does it mean like there should be a really good reason before you go to a curb? Or I'm just wondering about that. And also, if it's partly financed by TIF money, since TIF is supposed to be, it's sort of like you're doing development that's going to be helpful for your future. It's going to save you money in the future, but are the right kind of development decisions going behind the decisions if it's a whole bunch of paving parking lots? They're just going to kill us. You can't, they're not going to, it's not like setting something aside for a rainy day. It's like putting a debt for a for the future. If you don't make, if it's not targeted in the right way, but the ground rules in the TIF words might allow for that. It might say it's supposed to be setting aside for the future, okay? And then you can decide what you need in the future. If you still need the same things in the future that you thought, whatever, 30 years ago. Okay. The Urbana, I would like the Sustainability Advisory, before I lose my time, I would like the City Council to tell them that they should look at the work on the municipal electric aggregation program, like where the fee monies are for educating, could we influence with our buying decisions, and we could see what the new president's climate change things mean for that. Also, let's see, I'd like the Sustainability Advisory Commission to look at the contracts for the commingled recycling that the city has through Use Cycle. Now they have water and energy already covered. What are the implications for water and energy of the commingling recycling? And what's in the contracts? Because we have the responsibility as the driver of commingled recycling, as the city does, really have that responsibility. It's not too, I think it's really not too early to start to look at the municipal aggregation contract. I think it's up in the spring of next year, so right away would be a good time to start having public meetings where people could learn.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, we have a resolution before us. Is there further discussion or a motion? Charlie Smythe.
I move that we send the motion to adopt a sustainable water management plan to council for approval.
Second.
Okay, and seconded by Eric Jacobson. Other discussion? Yes, Michael.
I would like to ask if you guys could come back up. And I apologize, the packet was a little bit thick and I was out of town until today, so I haven't had the ability to read every word of this, but I noticed that you talk about an annual savings here or there of some dollars. Do you have any sense yet, or any actual numbers about, or estimates about what this would cost the city to convert some of these things, some of these water saving items? And believe me, I'm in favor of this kind of stuff. As long as it also makes some kind of economic sense in the near term.
Sure.
So I was just curious if I'm missing some numbers in here about what's a water saving urinal cost. I know it's.
Sure. Let me turn to that page. So faucet aerators are, you buy them in bulk. They're $1, $1.50 each. So that's an easy one. The computer server cooling room is going to have to be changed anyway. So that's an inevitable one because the current system is failing.
Could you say what page you're on?
Oh, sure. Page 18.
Are you on a different page 18 than I am?
17 in my
version. Then I have this. Oh.
I'm not sure. It's the one that has, it's the page that has the big EPA water sense mark at the bottom.
Okay. That was 18.
Yeah, but I'm still missing those numbers. I don't know.
Oh, those are from my head rather than on the paper. Sorry.
Mystery
I'll
is
try to read your
cleared.
mind.
Yeah, I was checking to see if they were in here, the capital expenses, but they're not. The next item, so rain sensors, soil moisture sensors. These are $50, $100, $150 piece type of equipment. And then the toilets are a couple $100 each.
And the cooling room needs to be changed out anyway. What's the difference in cost by doing it this way?
Well, they're going to switch. I think they're going to switch from a water-cooled system. Right now, the system that's been there for years uses water to cool the room once through. So it uses water once and it goes down the drain, and that just goes and goes and goes. So they're going to go to an electric system, electric-cooled system.
Okay, so the commission took into consideration the initial outlay of the city, and not just here's how much we'll save in water.
Right.
And what cost of water?
Right. What we did is worked with the facility supervisor to make sure that we were not setting him up to be mad at me. Right. We didn't want to propose anything that was not going to fit in his facilities retrofit budget.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
Other comments? Eric Jacobson.
So just to follow up on Mike's concern, oftentimes that concern is expressed as the payback time or how long it takes to, get your initial investment back.
Sure.
And maybe I missed that. Do you have some numbers like that?
I don't have this. I've done a lot of those calculations in the past, and so I can speak from a general sense. So faucet aerators are a couple month return on investment. The landscape equipment is more like a year to 2 years, and toilets are in the range of, depending on usage, of course, 3 years to 8 years. So if it's the toilet at the end of the hall that doesn't get used very often on the third floor or in the basement, okay, that's a return on investment more like 10 years. But if it's the one out front that's used all the time, because you're using, because it's more flushes, you get more savings each flush. That's more like 3 to 5 years.
Okay, so that sounds pretty good.
Yeah,
Mayor?
that figure caught my eye as well. And so it might be just useful, because people will ask that question, to slightly tweak it and give the return.
Sure.
How many years it takes to break even and everything.
Other? All right. We've got two things here. We've got the resolution we've just made a motion on that. So I'll say those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? All right. That goes to council, I guess. Or is that just straight approval? I don't know. It goes to council. Okay. Eric Jacobson.
So I just another comment. I know you've talked in your plan a little bit about public awareness. I wonder if it's appropriate to give the public some figures in return relative to investments that they can make at home in the form of return on investment.
Yeah. So I put the EPA WaterSense logo in here in part because they have an excellent public outreach program, and I'm hoping to be able to utilize a lot of their materials. That program is oriented towards the consumer, and so it's precisely the type of materials you're describing, and I want to incorporate those rather than sort of reinventing them. And so in terms of all of our public engagement, we want to make sure that we're giving the public information that's useful and going to motivate them to make that small investment for the long-term savings.
Okay, one more comment, Michael?
Yeah, I don't mean to belabor this, but in my line of work, Ameren comes in my door in my restaurant, and we'll change out your pre-rinse aerators on the faucets that hang down over the sinks. You've all seen them. Sure, great. Change it out. 2 days later, I come back into the restaurant, and it's not there anymore. I say, where'd it go? It's in the office. We changed it because it takes 3 times as long with this one. So I guess my point being, we need to be careful a bit and just make sure that what we're doing is actually working, as opposed to somebody flushing a toilet or urinal 3 or 4 times, which I'm not so sure in a public building that necessarily happens. At home it would if it wasn't working. But sometimes these things have really good intentions, but in reality they sometimes don't play out. So I would hope that we don't change everything out all at once, and maybe we try a couple here and there to make sure they're working well before we make the big leap.
Yeah, you're precisely right. So some other examples of what you're describing is you never change the faucet aerator to low flow at your kitchen sink, because if you're filling up a pot to boil water, you're going to be waiting twice as long to fill up the pot, right? So that's an example. Also, we're proposing 1 pint per flush or 0.125 gallon per flush urinals rather than something like a waterless, which is also difficult to get through the plumbing code, because you get an 80% reduction with a 1 pint per flush compared to the standard 1 gallon per flush, but you don't get any of the maintenance hassle that you have to deal with the waterless urinal. And then we're focusing on the urinal rather than the stool, because, as you mentioned, especially in public settings, you can get into management issues with a consumer-grade dual flush toilet. So I appreciate your comments.
All right, thanks. So we also have here an enduring role for the Urbana Sustainability Advisory Commission. Is this an action point, or is this just advisory?
This is advisory and asking for some direction from council. And I'm going to let Maria do most of the speaking on this, but I'll just set it up in that the enabling order. Actually, I think it's in the slide, so maybe I won't get ahead of it.
All right. I think some of you have been on City Council long enough to remember when we were formed in the year 2008 by an enabling ordinance that, in a nutshell, formed this commission to identify the highest priorities for city government and citizens to achieve sustainable management of natural resources, with water and energy being a particular focus. And I'm just going to run through a few of the steps that we've taken in the 5 years since we've been in existence. Our first action was in fall of 2009 to forward a set of recommended goals for adoption into the Urbana City Council and Mayor goals, and those did get pulled in February 2010, and then they were updated just about a year ago or so. And it looks like, and I think this one might be something that Scott could speak to a little bit.
Sure. Just an update of the Common Council goals included some sustainability goals, and I've just extracted all of those for my own purposes and gone through them and see what we've done and what's sort of in the works and what's in the queue, and that's an update on those.
Great. And then just last fall and into January, we decided to break our climate action plan, which was our way of addressing some of the energy focus that the council had asked of us through the ordinance, was through a climate action plan, and we broke it into 2 separate phases. The way that we planned it was that we'd have an initial phase that would kind of look at some of the things that were fairly readily implemented and that could be implemented at a low cost, combined with getting some task forces going that would explore in depth maybe some of the more difficult measures that might need to be taken for us to reach climate action goals, ways to reduce our carbon footprint according to the goals that were set forth in that climate action plan. So really what we're looking at right now is we have about a year, maybe a year and a half before we really start working in earnest on phase 2 document, which would carry us through to the goals that we'd like to see the city achieve for 2050 in terms of carbon reduction across the city. So that phase 1 document has already gone to you, and it's, as you can see, staff has already pushed many of the goals forward. We're really moving along pretty quickly with that. Tonight, you just saw and voted on the Sustainable Water Management Plan, which again addresses that other initial focus, so energy and water. And so really what we're a little bit of a crossroads right now. We have, as I said, about a year, maybe a year and a half before, as the various task forces connected to the Phase 1 Climate Action Plan do their work. We're, I suppose you could say, in a little bit of a holding pattern. And we had wanted to come back to the council and the mayor to just get a little bit of your thoughts, especially because there are a number of new members on the council since that ordinance was passed, to get your thoughts on the best and most useful focus for us to have in the immediate months before us. A few ideas that the commission members talked about were that, we could perhaps serve as a forum for sustainability issues with a kind of an action focus, that at least some of our meetings would include presentations by experts, and all meetings would involve, some kind of plans for engagement or other actions. Another approach would be to serve as a forum for sustainability issues with a focus on public discussion, so that presentations by experts would be a vital part of the focus, and it would really be more of a discussion forum than an action forum per se. Another potential area would be for us to identify synergies among other groups, such as governmental agencies, boards, and commissions, and really to work on building collaborative relationships among those groups. And of course, that would help pave the way for much of what we have in the Phase 1 Climate Action Plan, which would, kind of move forward into Phase 2, because we know that we're going to need regional cooperation to really advance things forward, not just for the city of Urbana, but for all the communities that are that we're living near, and I suppose in the case of the county, almost have our borders overlap. So, so at any rate, that is kind of the crux of what we're coming forward to you tonight with, is just to ask if any of these seem like the type of direction you'd like to see us go in, or if there's just another direction altogether.
Okay, yes, Mayor.
Well, it seems to me that all three of those are very useful, because you need all of them.
I'm sorry?
I think you need all of these three things, and that's a good approach, because you're trying to learn from other people and see how you can work with them. And we're going to, when we go to China, we're going to be talking about the Sister Rivers program. And I thought maybe you could talk about our sustainability plan, because I think Guangzhou has one too. So I think it'd be very interesting to see what other, I know that cities have really taken the lead on this, and I know cities in China as well. So I think that's a great area to sort of learn from other people and share ideas.
Other comments? Yes, Carol.
I also thought that the comment by Ms. McCusick around the municipal aggregation would be a very good place for that to be reviewed. Obviously, it's new in Urbana, and as Mike said, I'm not sure half the time if I'm saving money or not. It depends. But we would like some kind of energy study around the municipal aggregation. I think that would be a good fit for you guys.
Any other direction or comments? Mike?
Just one point. This is all kind of new to me. But gee, you asked, so I'm going to say. Is there anywhere in here that you can fit maybe working with some local businesses on strategies that they've done in this realm? I don't see anything about the word private sector or business in here.
Yeah, and a lot of that is encompassed in the Phase 1 document, but we could certainly, make a, just a point of drawing that out in our activities.
Haven't read Phase 1, sorry, I'll get on that.
Yes, Eric Jacobson.
So it seems to me that the big payoffs, if we just slice this a different way, the big payoffs are in energy usage, lowering carbon footprint, energy sources and energy usages, and water.
That's right.
Because those are the two. One is sort of the most immediate global crisis, and the second is the one that's coming on its heels, not too far behind. So, I guess I'm thinking that maybe that's a good way to organize materials. I mean, you've got, materials organized by activity and a few other different ways, and they all kind of make sense. But the most fundamental way, it seems to me, is energy and water. And somehow, if you can project in educational materials that those are really the foundational issues, I think that would to me, that would bring the point home.
Okay, these are all very good examples of, I think, some direction from council. And if anybody has further insights, they might want to just email them to Todd or to Scott and Mariah. Myra? Maria. I cannot get your name. I am so sorry.
It's okay.
Mari.
It's a
Y, not an I. Yeah.
It rhymes with how are ya?
Okay. Jeez, for some reason I'm dyslexic on the vocabulary of that. So, I think I hope you have enough direction to consider action. It sounds like we like everything, so you're just piling it on.
Okay.
Yeah, do more.
Do more. Yeah, well, actually, we've done a lot. Thank you for that presentation.
Thank you.
All right, let's go to, we're going through this rather slow. Maybe we can pick up the pace a little bit.
Yeah, in fact, Dennis, I have a suggestion.
Go ahead then.
The next 3 items are pretty much boilerplate. I'd like to suggest we get a 1 sentence from each, if needed, if anybody has any questions, any of these 3. Otherwise, we just omnibus send them to council with a recommendation for approval.
No, we got an ordinance. We can't do
yeah.
that with 2
Well,
resolutions.
no, these are go to council.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
So these are all just going to council. So,
Yeah,
so
all right,
let
we
me
can
just
do
read
that.
them. I move to send to council these 3 items. Ordinance number 2013-758, an ordinance revising the annual budget ordinance for the fire thermal cameras. Resolution 2013-730R, approving an intergovernmental agreement with the City of Champaign, County of Champaign, and Village of Rantoul concerning the Edward Brin Memorial Justice Assistance Grant Program, which is basically the JAG money that we get every year, which this time will be used for ammunition. And then resolution number 2013-729R, resolution for improvement by municipality under the Illinois Highway Code. This is the Airport Road East Reconstruction Project. I'd move to send all 3 to council with recommendation for approval
Second.
based on the memos. And if we have questions for staff, they're right here, and they've been waiting patiently, so.
Great. All right, we have a
a
second also, and Caroline Mintz, do you want to comment?
I just had one question for the chief of police.
Go ahead then.
Just for the Justice Assistance Grant Program. I guess I'll make them 2 very short questions. One you don't have to answer if you don't mind.
Yeah.
But why does Urbana get so little of the grant? Is to share the grant agreement, which I don't know the answer to. And 2, outside of the amount that you illustrated would be spent currently to purchase new ammunition, what will happen with the rest of the money?
Well,
For Urbana.
Okay, the first question is, it's based on the number of police officers that the grant focuses on. Champaign is twice as big as us, that's why they get a lot more money. As far as where the rest of the money goes, it changes daily. As a matter of fact, the speed trailer that we have used for the last 11 years, which we purchased off of a grant, so it's not VERFed, is now damaged beyond repair, and odds are we're not going to be able to supplement our ammunition and go with a speed trailer, because those are very vital to reducing speeds in neighborhoods, and we get a lot of complaints from folks about how fast people are traveling in their neighborhoods, and this speed trailer actually identified the speed and then registered it for us. So odds are that's where the rest of the money is going to be going now.
Yeah, all right. All right, so there's a question here. Do you want to answer that question? Mike?
Did it get crashed into?
No, it's just 11 years old, and it's starting to fall apart. The batteries are, which were...
All right.
Okay. I saw one at the end of my block that looked like it had been thrown over, so I thought maybe that was the one that you have, but apparently that's a different object.
How much are those?
Bob Fitzgerald's looking into now, probably around $9,000, I'm guessing. Although I would like the kind that registers rather than just identifies, because then we don't get trends. So we're going to have to upgrade our technology just a little bit.
Okay, other questions? We've got a suggestion that we have let's just take the vote. A motion and second, we're all on the way. So those in favor of sending those three items to council with recommendation of approval indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, there we go. All right, community development, and we have quite a few numbers of community development issues. So,
I hope so.
I'd like to consolidate as many of these as we possibly
it seems
can.
very possible that we could. So, do you want to summate all of your recommendations, or how many do you want to go through at once?
Well, I could.
Do number A first, anyway, for sure.
So yeah, the certification. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, and then the sale of real estate. I could put those together.
Okay.
If that's good.
You certainly have our permission to do so.
Okay. So historically, we've worked with Champaign County Neighborhood Alliance for Habitat as a community housing development organization to undertake home program activities. So they, build new single-family houses to turn them over to low-income families. Habitat for Humanity is the parent organization of that, and both boards have decided they would rather just revert back to their original status. Now that their board structure has changed a little bit, they can meet the requirements of the home program in order to be eligible as a community housing development organization. They relate to board structure, those sorts of things. And so each time we grant funds to one of these organizations, we have to recertify them. So this time, instead of just recertifying, we're actually certifying Habitat for Humanity. So this will be the first time that they're actually functioning as the CHODO. So all of our contracts will be different. It's all under Habitat now. They've requested $37,910 to undertake a project at 1007 North Berkeley Avenue. And that lot transfer is also included as part of the agenda items today. And they've also requested $7,000 in operating funds to assist them with the day-to-day activities that are involved with building a house and running the program and following all of our extra rules that, we impose on them as a CHODO. So that is in keeping with, what we've given historically. We've sort of shifted to a per unit allocation for operating funds. And the Home Technical Committee reviewed that in May and approved the funding recommendations as they were presented. And CDC also recommended approval unanimously of the ordinances and resolutions as presented.
Okay. Let me read them quickly then for the record, and I'll recommend we send these to council. So, resolution number 2013-731R, resolution certifying a community housing development organization for Urbana Home Consortium for 2013-14, that's Habitat. Resolution 2013-732R, resolution approving and authorizing the execution of an Urbana Home Consortium CHODO agreement with Developer Affordable Home Ownership Program at 107 North Berkeley. Resolution 2013-733R, resolution approving and authorizing the execution of an Urbana Home CHODO organization agreement with Habitat Operating, July 2013. Then the sale of certain property here, which are companions to these CHODOs. Ordinance 2013-760, an ordinance authorizing the sale of certain real estate at 1007 North Berkeley Avenue, and Ordinance 761, an ordinance authorizing the sale of certain real estate at 810 East Park Street. Move these in omnibus fashion to council with recommendation for approval.
Is there a second? Diane Marlin seconds it. Is there discussion? Those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Those are moved forward to the council. Thank you. Now we continue. Annual action plan, home amendments.
Yes. So this Grants Management Division has operated a transitional housing program for homeless families with children since 1991. When we originally required the units, we also received funds to rehabilitate them. But that was obviously some time ago, 20-plus years, and now some larger ticket items are in need of replacement, such as the roofs, the furnaces. The units don't have central air, those sorts of things, and they've taken a lot of abuse, obviously, with families moving in and out every year to 2 years, depending on how long they're in the program. And in looking to identify funds that would, qualify to undertake these repairs, we have applied for Federal Home Loan Bank of Chicago funds, but based on their application scoring system, we couldn't really request funds to the extent that would allow us to undertake, the entire project. We could only request a portion, so we've requested $6,000 for each unit. We won't find out about those funds till November. And we looked at our CDBG funding. It's very limited because this activity is part of the public service cap. We can only spend so much. We're not allowed to go past that. And so we've been obviously maintaining service calls and minor repairs as needed, but to do these larger repairs, we looked at other funds, and our only other grant right now that's large enough is the home program. And so the amendment that is before the committee is to move $40,000 from what is currently under our owner-occupied rehabilitation program in the fiscal year 11-12 annual action plan to move it to the activity that's listed in that plan for rental rehabilitation. So the projects themselves would very much look like an owner-occupied housing rehab project, but we're doing it to benefit our transitional housing families. So I can take any questions.
Okay, Charlie, it's mine.
And so these are major, just major rehabs then?
Yes.
Yeah, so, and they're 2 at $20,000 each, is that?
Correct.
Right.
And then we're
okay,
hoping to get the additional Federal Home Loan Bank funds
Okay.
to augment that.
And when you, so that would augment it, does that mean that there isn't enough money to do everything that needs to be done without that, or would we get money back to use for other things?
It would allow us to do the major repairs that are really needed, like the roofs and the furnaces. We'd have to look at the central air. Is that really possible? Those sorts of things. So, based on, we'll have these city inspectors go through and give us their recommendations for what the greatest need is and kind of prioritize from there. So we're confident we can, complete the project and do what's really needed to be done. But we would obviously like to have the extra $6,000 to, use some better quality materials and things that'll really last longer, given the use that these units see.
And Eric.
So basically, you want to move money from where it's urgently needed to where it's desperately needed.
Correct.
Are these units in random spots in the city, or are they in a certain complex area?
They are scattered sites.
Scattered sites.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Yes, Charlie?
I move to send this to council with a recommendation for approval. This is ordinance number 2013-759, an ordinance approving a minor amendment to the City of Urbana and Home Consortium fiscal year 2011-2012 annual action plan.
Second.
Eric Jacobson seconds it. Discussion? Seeing none, those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
And the next
None.
two will be able to move together too, but somebody else has those.
Right.
Okay.
Looks like the next part is supportive housing program, homeless families in transition. Thank you.
Good evening. The two resolutions that are before you are for subrecipient agreements to the Center for Women in Transition and the Salvation Army. These two agencies operate a supportive housing program for homeless families, and they've been doing this since 1995. The agencies use these funds for their operational expenses, supportive service costs for the residents, and administration fees. The City of Urbana also receives a portion of these funds to use towards the administering and oversight of the agencies and to do the monitoring and the reporting that HUD requires. If there are any questions, CDC also recommended that this unanimously move to council.
Comments? Yes, Charlie.
I'll just move to send both of these to council with recommendation for approval. Resolution 2013-734R, a resolution approving a supportive housing program subrecipient agreement with Center for Women in Transition, and 35R, a resolution approving the supportive housing program subrecipient agreement with the Salvation Army for, again, fiscal year 2013-2014.
Carol.
I'm going to abstain since it's omnibus on both of these, because I have working relationships with both agencies, so I'll just abstain just for the purpose of this.
I think I'll second. I don't think I heard a second.
We haven't heard a second, but thank you, Eric. All right. Any other comments? Those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? You're on the way. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Ordinance, next is an item, ordinance concerning community development fund, service funds. Who's going to present for that? Kelly? Okay, thank you.
Yes, before you is an ordinance revising the annual budget ordinance, specifically for Community Development Block Grant and for the Community Development Special Funds as part of end of year line item adjustments. As you can see in the memo, it lists the different line items and the proposed changes.
Okay. Are there
So
questions
sta-
for Kelly? Or do you?
I was going to say staff is recommending approval of the
These are all pretty minor.
ordinance.
Okay, all right. Yes.
I move
Diane.
approval of ordinance number 2013-07-064, an ordinance revising the annual budget ordinance fiscal year 2012-2013.
Second.
Okay, Charlie Smythe, seconds. Thank you very much.
Oh, I move to send it to council.
Okay, it's be sent to the council. All right, any other discussion on this? Seeing none. Those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, and opposed, none. That forwards to council. Thank you so much, Kelly. All right, now we're talking about a liquor license. Mayor, do you want to present?
Yeah, this is a request from a restaurant to increase their liquor license.
Yes, Michael.
I
Increase
need
the
to
total.
recuse myself.
All right, Mike's going to recuse himself.
Question?
Questions? Yeah, I mean, are we in
Yeah.
discussion on this?
Yeah, I did not, okay, so I know the ownership is changing, but we're increasing the number. They already have a liquor license. How come we're not, why is there a number change here when it should be staying the same? We're just approving we're just
new ownership.
basically approving a new owner.
I don't know if it's approving a new owner. Isn't he, does he already own the bread company, or is that somebody else?
This is the son is taking over from.
Okay,
yeah,
well,
isn't it? That's the way I
um,
understood it. And so there's an existing liquor license, so why isn't this a one-for-one trade?
I think he's expanding it.
Oh, is he changing or
Yeah.
expanding?
Yeah.
So it's a
If they're adding one, right, from going from 4
It's
to
an
5.
R2. Is an R2 a higher level of?
It was created for restaurants.
Okay.
R is for restaurants.
R215?
Yeah, so I think it's,
Yes, Diane Marlin.
So if he's getting a different license, shouldn't we see a corresponding decrease in one of these other licenses?
Yeah.
no, I think he's adding a license. That's what we're doing
Why-
here.
I don't-
It's being added. Did you work on this at all? Yeah, I think it is an addition.
Oh, okay.
The-
Well,
So he needs 2 licenses?
He
yes,
does.
because the.
And, if we have a question about it, I'll ask Jolinda tomorrow, and we'll get it clarified before the council meeting. But I would recommend that you approve it, and I'll answer your question before
And-
the council meeting.
And as background, I know that the Landmark Hotel has 2 different licenses. They have 2 different kinds of services that they offer.
Ah, okay.
So I'm not sure if this is.
Yeah,
similar.
that's the same kind of thing.
yeah. I
It's
move
the
to
location in the building.
I move to
It's-
send it to council with recommendation for approval.
Second.
Okay, Charlie Smythe and Diane Marlin. Any further questions or comments? Those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed? Okay, that goes to council with approval. And seeing no further business, unless there are any announcements, we are adjourned.
See what happens when I say here instead of present?
Well,